She was the eldest sister in the family. Below her was the third brother named Thomas and the youngest brother named Timothy. He was called that because when he was born, he was tiny and was born right in the middle of a cornfield. Her mother had the youngest brother, Timothy, late, so the two siblings were 10 years apart. Less than a month after giving birth, her mother had to go to work, leaving the youngest brother at home for her to take care of. In those difficult years, the family was poor when her father married her mother. Both sides of the family did not accept them, so they received no help from paternal or maternal grandparents. But her mother was very capable. She never sat still, jumping from one job to another to earn money, working without rest. Even so, she still couldn't please the paternal grandmother, Mrs. Abigail, because her mother's side was poor and her maternal grandfather had 2 wives. The paternal side said that when marrying a man, look at his lineage. And when marrying a wife, look at her breed. They feared her mother might have wandering blood with 2 or 3 husbands like her father. Her mother felt very hurt hearing this, but because she loved her father, she gritted her teeth and endured it. When the youngest brother was born, he was playful and cute, just like a normal child. But the thing was, by the age of 5, he still didn't know how to walk or talk. When Mrs. Abigail came over and saw her grandson like that, instead of showing love, she mocked the mother. She said they were already poor yet greedy to give birth, having so many children without knowing how to raise them, which is why the child ended up like that. At that time, she felt very frustrated for her mother, but as a grandchild, she didn't dare say anything. If she said anything, the grandmother would tell the father, and she would get beaten nearly to death. The father only ever went against the grandmother's wishes when he married the mother. In almost everything else, he followed the grandmother's lead. That year, Mrs. Abigail was weak, mostly sitting in one poi, but she was incredibly difficult to deal with. All the hardships and suffering her mother had to endure during that time, as well as the psychological trauma her siblings experienced in childhood, mostly came from the grandmother. Every time there was a family gathering, the grandmother would come back and the father would be very irritable with the mother. If the mother talked back out of frustration, the father would drag her out and beat her severely. Even though for every holiday, her mother went over early to help and did everything herself, it was never enough. When it was time to serve the meal, if Miss Abigail didn't tell her to get this, Aunt Sarah would ask her to get that. In short, with the grandmother in charge, everyone felt they could order the mother around. The topic her mother was most frequently criticized for was the youngest brother, Timothy. At home, her mother called him Timothy, but the paternal side called him Little Stray because he was born in the field. To make it easier to hear, she would still call her brother by the name familiar to her, Timothy. Truly, people's mouths are cruel. Miss Beatrice, the grandmother's biological sister, said, a child that age who doesn't know how to walk or stand. If it were me, I would have thrown him in an orphanage and raised another child to save money. Uncle Robert said, give him to someone else to raise and try for a healthy child so that when you're old he can repay you. Why raise that paralyzed lineage for a lifetime? So many mouths scrutinizing a 5-year-old child. It was painful and infuriating to hear. That year she was 15 years old, but she understood everything. She knew her youngest brother suffered many disadvantages, so she loved him very much from a young age. At that time, she was feeding him in the back kitchen. In the front house, everyone was boisterously gathered for the party. Honestly, the mother and children didn't want to be there, but the father forced them to go early to help with cooking. In reality, they were there to be servants for those people. They knew they couldn't swallow the food, but they couldn't go home until the father allowed it. They just had to sit there and listen to people whispering and saying things, feeling frustrated but not daring to argue. It wasn't that her mother didn't want to treat the youngest brother. Every penny she made, she tried to save to take him to the hospital for checkups. If anyone mentioned a good doctor, she would take him there too. Everyone said his bones and joints were normal. Her mother was upset, saying if he's normal, why doesn't he know how to walk or talk? They told the family to wait a bit longer to see, so they just had to accept it. Then by chance, her mother followed a group of hired laborers to work in the garden of a large estate, about 2 acres in size, surrounded by solid walls. The owners highly valued landscape design and symbolism. When the group entered, the owner and a spiritual advisor were discussing construction in the yard. Suddenly, the advisor stared intently at her mother. She didn't pay much attention and went to help dig a ditch in the backyard. A while later, the lady of the house came out and called her in. Her mother was confused. Inside were the owners and the advisor, whom they called Mr. Miller. They asked her to sit down. "Mr. Miller said, looking at you, I see 2 spirits in your house, one old and one young. These 2 spirits have followed you for a long time. Is it true you have a child who has difficulty walking and standing?" Her mother was stunned. She thought the condition was from the womb and never considered spiritual matters. He continued, "Those 2 spirits have a debt with your mother-in-law. Consequently, the child spirit is haunting your son, and the old lady spirit is haunting your mother-in-law." Her mother, half believing and half doubting, asked what the debt was. Mr. Miller said, "You have to go home and ask your mother-in-law. Only when the story is clear can we plan. I can only say this much." He gave her his address and told her to find him only when the grandmother was willing to tell the truth. He would show her how to resolve it. If you stubbornly hide it, then just leave it and suffer. Do you think her mother dared to ask how could she? She waited for a time when the father was happy to ask tentatively. The father told her that when he was young, next to Mrs. Abigail's house lived an elderly woman and her grandson. The old lady was about 60, and the boy was around 10 or so. They were very poor, collecting scrap to survive. One day, on their way back, the boy accidentally knocked over Mrs. Abigail's tray of drying fruit. Mrs. Abigail saw it from inside and came out screaming. The old lady apologized, bending down to pick them up, and the boy helped too. To be fair, fruit that falls on the ground is dirty and can't be eaten. Mrs. Abigail was angry and pushed the boy. It was a light push to get him to move, not malicious. But he was a child. He fell sideways onto the ground. The old lady, hurt for her grandson, said, "My grandson accidentally knocked them over, and I'm picking them up for you. Speak gently. Why did you push him?" Back then, Mrs. Abigail was already famously stubborn. Even when she grew up, the grandmother would scold and drive the 2 away. The boy walked a few steps and then seemed to have a seizure. His eyes turned white and he foamed at the mouth. Miss Abigail was startled, partly out of fear and partly thinking the old lady would demand compensation. She hurried inside. By the afternoon, when the grandmother went to buy things, she heard the boy had died. The shop owner said the boy had epilepsy. The father said Mrs. Abigail didn't know for sure if her push caused his death, but she was very scared. She kept quiet and didn't tell the grandfather. Only a few neighbors helped with the funeral, and his parents never showed up. Only the old lady arranged the burial in a very simple grave. After the funeral, the old lady would mumble curses whenever she passed the house, saying Mrs. Abigail was cruel for pushing her grandson. At first, the grandmother endured it, but after a few times, she shouted back. They ended up hating each other. The old lady said Mrs. Abigail was rich, but had no virtue. Mrs. Abigail's family was indeed well off then. The grandmother retorted that the old lady was poor because of her mouth. The boy died. What does it have to do with me that you keep cursing? One day, the old lady passed by and cursed while Mrs. Abigail was sweeping the porch. The grandmother shouted more, saying the old lady knew how to give birth but not how to teach, letting her daughter have a child out of wedlock. Just die and be done with it. The old lady replied that even if she died, she would haunt Mrs. Abigail's family. 2 days later, the old lady actually died, hit by a car right in front of the house. That day, before she could enter her house, a drunk neighbor hit her. She fell with a thud. They helped her inside, and she could still talk, but by night, she died. It was only when the mailman saw she hadn't come out that they found her. Her body was stiff and her face was pale. After that old lady died, Mrs. Abigail's health declined sharply. Most of the family's wealth was spent on her illnesses. By the time her mother had the youngest brother, Timothy, Mrs. Abigail was bedridden and their land was almost gone. Her father was the eldest son, but because her mother wasn't liked, they were only given a small plot of land to raise their children. After hearing the father's story, her mother suspected the old lady was haunting them, but she didn't dare tell the grandmother. With her temperament, she would only get scolded more. Her mother only worried for Timothy. She went to find Mr. Miller and told him everything. Mr. Miller said, "Your mother-in-law's character won't change even until death. Mountains and rivers are easy to change, but nature is hard to alter. Just take care of your own part." He told her to go home, buy a large, fat leafy. Don't tell anyone. Take it home, hold it by the head, and whip its tail against your son's legs. But do not let the fish fall on the ground. As she walked out, he added, on the way back, if you smell anything strange, like a foul stench or a burning smell, just walk straight. Don't stop or look around. Her mother wanted to ask why, but he sent her away. Go take care of your child. When he can walk, come back and I'll explain. Her mother did exactly as instructed. She went to the market early and picked a very fat live fish. She carried the bag of fish and walked home. On the dirt road passing Mrs. Abigail's house, which was before her own house, she suddenly smelled something foul. At first, it was faint, like a smell blown by the wind, but it got foulest as if someone was blowing that rot into her face. It smelled like decay mixed with a burning scent, exactly as Mr. Miller warned. At that time, she wasn't scared yet and walked straight home. She secretly carried Timothy to the back of the house, sat him on the wooden bed with his legs hanging down. She held the fish's head and whipped the tail against his legs. After a few whips, she looked at Timothy to see if anything was different. She did this twice, and Timothy began to walk. At first, he stumbled like a baby, but later he could walk like other children. Everyone was overjoyed. Only Mrs. Abigail curled her lip and said, "Over 5 years old and just learning to walk, acting like it's something precious." Her mother fully believed Mr. Miller then. Timothy was haunted by a spirit, which was why he couldn't walk. Her mother intended to tell the grandmother so she would know the past was affecting her, but after the grandmother's comment, she was annoyed and stayed silent. Besides, Mrs. Abigail wouldn't believe it anyway. Her mother thanked Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller said something that made her mother's skin crawl. The foul and burning smells weren't accidental. Usually, if you're on a deserted road and suddenly smell perfume, it's a female spirit. Tobacco is a male spirit. Medicinal oil is from elderly spirits. Incense is from ancestors. But foul and burning smells are from demons following you. The stronger the smell, the closer they are to your face. Her mother shuddered. Thanks to Mr. Miller, Timothy could walk. As for his speech and development, the advisor said that was heaven's will. He explained that Timothy bore all the family's karma. She and the third brother Thomas were born first and took all the cleverness, leaving Timothy with the bad and slow portion of the family. She noted that in large families there's often one who is slower or very gentle, whom people call the karma bearer. Mr. Miller said Timothy was that person, but the family's karma was heavy, so he suffered more. Her mother was very sad and always told her to take care of her brother. He was born suffering the injustices of life. She always remembered her mother's words. Since her father died, the mother and children rarely visited the paternal side because there was little love. Miss Abigail was still bedridden and difficult. Later, when she was very old, she mellowed slightly. She only called for Thomas. She said that when she died, the family home would be left to Thomas because he was normal and could maintain the family heritage. As a daughter who had married out, she didn't comment, but she felt sad for Timothy. He was also her grandchild. After she got married, her husband, Michael, was hard-working but didn't tolerate her family well. 2 years later, she had twin boys. Michael doted on them. At that time, Thomas was married and moved in with Mrs. Abigail. Timothy still lived with the mother. After she gave birth, her mother brought Timothy to visit. Timothy sat at the doorstep, wanting to pet the babies but afraid. She signaled him to hold one. Timothy was very happy. His movements were clumsy, but he held the baby gently. Not 3 minutes later, Michael came home and saw this. He immediately snatched the baby away, his face furious. After the mother and Timothy left, Michael grumbled, "Don't let that crazy guy hold our child. Who knows if he'll have a fit and drop him." He also complained that her mother smelled strongly of medicinal oil, which wasn't good for babies. Hearing him call her brother crazy and criticize her mother, her feelings for him faded. It was painful that the man she shared a bed with didn't respect her family, being young and impulsive. She would take the twins to her mother's house whenever Michael was away, so Timothy could hold them. Timothy was very careful with the grandchildren. That continued until someone told Michael. He made a scene and forbade her from going to her mother's. They argued constantly. While her mother was alive, she and Timothy lived together, so she didn't worry too much. When the twins were 6, her mother died. Timothy lived alone in that house. He couldn't move in with Thomas because Miss Abigail was still there and didn't love him. Thomas, living with the grandmother, was manipulated by her and sometimes seemed to dislike Timothy. Every once in a while, Thomas would visit to check on him and give Timothy some supplies, just to fulfill his duty. She knew Timothy couldn't care for himself, so she told Michael, "He's my biological brother. Our parents are gone. I'm his only support, so I won't abandon him. If you love me, love him too." Michael just brushed it off, but after that, he didn't complain as much when Timothy visited, as long as he didn't have to see him. She often wondered what Timothy had done to deserve such treatment from everyone. Mrs. Abigail, the father, the brother, and her husband. Everyone called him crazy. If he wasn't lucky, people should at least not be bitter. One might pity a dog or cat on the street, yet he was a human and a relative. When Timothy was 31, it rained all day. The weather forecast warned of a big storm. Michael was frustrated because the crops were blown down. He asked her to prepare some snacks for him to drink bourbon. While they were eating, Timothy trudged over. He was soaking wet and shivering. She hurried to get him dry clothes. Inside, she could hear Michael grumbling about unlucky and burdensome things. She was angry but said nothing. She pulled her brother in and dried him off. Looking at the meal, she knew he was hungry but didn't dare say anything, just looking at his brother-in-law and the nephews. His awkward posture broke her heart. She pulled him to sit and gave him a full plate. He hesitantly asked Michael, "Can I eat?" He spoke with difficulty. She told him to eat. The meal wasn't peaceful because Michael, drunk, kept complaining about the poor harvest and rising costs. Finally, she slammed her plate down and said, "I told you this long ago. It's just a plate of food. Yet you've been grumbling. We can't swallow our food." She said she couldn't cut the bond of kinship, and if he continued, they couldn't stay together. He quieted down. After eating, she told Timothy to go home to sleep. She tucked 2 bananas and some cakes into his hand for later. She didn't realize that was the last meal she would ever cook for him. That night, the storm was the longest she'd ever experienced. The wind shrieked through the dorms and the old walls trembled. She couldn't sleep, feeling restless. Near dawn, the wind died down. Michael was snoring loudly when someone pounded on the door. "Timothy is dead." She ran out. They found him in the field. A piece of metal roofing had blown off and killed him. Next to him were the 2 bananas she had given him. He died near a grove close to her house, but she hadn't known. She did chores and earned a little, but was financially dependent on Michael. He refused to pay for a proper funeral, saying Timothy never contributed anything and only burdened the family. Thomas and Mrs. Abigail also said there was no need for an expensive casket for a dead person. She almost knelt to beg, but the paternal side refused to let him be buried on their land. Finally, she told Michael, "If you don't care that he's my brother, consider this a loan. I'll cremate him and I'll pay you back later." He finally gave her the money. During the cremation, she leaned against a wall and dozed off. She dreamed of Timothy standing before her, looking angry, saying he didn't want to be put in a church columbarium. He said it 3 times. She woke up and decided to bring his ashes home to the altar with their parents. She didn't expect that while he was gentle in life, his spirit would be quite active, especially haunting Mrs. Abigail and Michael. One evening, Michael was walking home past the grove where Timothy died. He heard a cackling laugh, a laugh that wasn't normal. He knew it was Timothy but wasn't afraid yet. He shouted, "I'm not scared if you haunt me. I'll deal with you." The laughing stopped, but after 3 steps, he tripped over something soft and fell. He cursed, but saw nothing, only hearing that cackling again. He ran home in terror. She told him, "You treated him poorly in life, so now he's teasing you." Miss Abigail was also haunted. One night, after being cleaned and fed by Thomas's wife, Jane, the grandmother was trying to sleep. The house had thin partitions. Miss Abigail started shouting, "Who's rustling in the pantry? Let me sleep." Thomas was out, and the kids were studying with their mother. Jane went up and saw the grandmother cursing at a corner. Later, Mrs. Abigail screamed again, saying someone was making the blinds rattle. Thomas came home and heard her cursing. "Timothy has come back to haunt me, a burden in life and a ghost in death." Thomas lit a candle and slept on the floor to watch over her. In the middle of the night, he felt a freezing chill. He saw a shadow walk from the front, pass him, and climb into the pantry, spinning around. He knew it was his brother. The blinds rattled loudly despite there being no wind. Thomas prayed, "I know it's you. Timothy, stop it. Tomorrow I'll bring your favorite food to offer you." The rattling stopped. Everyone in the family met Timothy's ghost except her. She wondered why. Then, one April, she was preparing for a trip. She had prepared food and drinks. She asked her son to set an alarm. While sleeping, she got up and saw Timothy sitting at the dining table. He sat huddled just as he did when Michael grumbled at him. He looked at her and said clearly, "Sister, don't go." His speech was no longer slurred. She was terrified and felt her head spinning. When the alarm went off, her son found her sleeping on the floor next to the table. Feeling unwell and remembering Timothy's warning, she canceled her trip. The next afternoon, she heard the group had been robbed and their bus crashed. Everyone was injured. That was the first and last time she saw him. Every year on his death anniversary, she prays for him to visit or send a message from their parents. But she never saw him again. She stayed with Michael until the twins entered university. She paid him back for the funeral expenses and then divorced him. She moved to the city with her sons, caring for them and finally living a free life.